Welcome to the City of Bakersfield, the Something Better podcast. I'm Joe Conroy, your host. And today I'm joined by Theo Dues, Regional Manager of Mercy House. Is that right?
That's correct, Joe.
And we're going to talk a little bit about homelessness. And I want to jump right into the conversation because this is something I think that the public is very interested in. They want to know what we're doing, what are we doing, how much are we doing, why aren't we doing more, why is it still a concern? So we want to jump right in. And you guys, as Mercy House, operate the Brundage Lane Navigation Center, which was the city's first emergency homeless center. Tell me a little bit about what Mercy House is and what you guys are doing for us.
Mercy House as an organization is dedicated to the ending of homelessness in our country. We were born in Southern California. We've expanded into Northern California, Central California, Arizona. And what we do is provide a dignified system of supported housing and services to end the cycle of homelessness in people's lives.
And this is a problem that's not just localized to Bakersfield. This is a national problem, homelessness.
Yes.
Lots of locations are dealing with this. It's not an easy solution or easy problem to figure out and solve. One of the things you guys are doing, though, is being able to place people into permanent solutions, permanent housing solutions. Tell me a little bit about what that means. What does a permanent housing solution mean?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me state this, Joe. Our shelter is what's called a housing first model of sheltering. There are a number of issues we need to address along the way. There are often chemical addiction issues or mental health issues or domestic violence issues. And we can address all of those, but we prefer to get people housed, making that the priority, because once they're housed, their homelessness is ended, and we can continue to provide the supportive services they need after they're housed. So for us, housing is the single most priority. We believe that ultimately the only solution to homelessness is housing. So that is our emphasis.
And that can look different for a lot of different people in terms of housing or a housing solution, correct?
Yes.
What would be some of those different options or different solutions?
Yeah. So for some of our guests, they're immediately going to go back into the employment arena, earn a living wage, and rent a market-based unit. But that's not the case with most of our guests. Most of them are traumatized or wounded in different ways, and they're not capable of providing for themselves on that level. So they'll need some form of subsidized housing. Those are called vouchers. And so our goal is to get that individual matched with a housing voucher that will subsidize their rent so they know they'll be safely housed going forward.
And that's part of their journey when they come to the BLNC is to be matched up with a
housing voucher.
A housing voucher, but also the specialists to help them with maybe different barriers that they may be facing.
Yeah, absolutely. Nobody can navigate that system on their own. So we provide what's called a housing navigator. And the navigator's job is to not only connect them to that housing voucher and help them get housed, but to help them address the myriad of issues that led to their homelessness in the first place.
Right. Whether it's maybe substance abuse, or they lost their job or something, and maybe they don't have a driver's license anymore. So you guys are there, or your system is there to kind of help them, guide them through that process to maybe get back on the track and get those documents or get that issue figured out so they don't have a problem again.
Yeah, oftentimes that's step one in the housing process. We have to get their vital documents. And if they've lived on the streets for any amount of time, very likely they no longer have an identification or a social security card. So obtaining those two items is the first step in the process.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of people forget. You take for granted that you have a driver's license or a social security card. And they forget that, if you're homeless, you may not have those things anymore. You may have lost it along the way. And, for somebody to say, well, why don't you just go and get a job? Like you're here on the corner. Why can't you just show up to a job like that? They may not have those things that are needed in order to get back on track.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only typically have many of them lost those heads on the streets, I think in most cases, they've been victimized. They've been victims of crime, and those things have been stolen from them. Homeless people are 6 times more likely to be the victims of violent crime than anybody else.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a startling fact. And when people get to our shelter, oftentimes they don't have anything because they've been victimized. Those things have been stolen from them. A lot of predators on the streets, and the homeless are very often victimized in ways that they lose their property.
That's great to know. I mean, it's sad to hear, but it's good for people to understand that. And I think people don't understand sometimes the journey that some of these folks have been on. How do they end up at the BLNC? Because it's a little bit different entry system than some of the other homeless centers here in Bakersfield.
Right. Yeah. Many of the service centers in Bakersfield are walk-up services. Meaning when the person needs the services, they walk up, they explain what they need, and they made the decision to ask for help, and they go in there and ask for it. We operate a little differently. We are by referral only. We don't have any walk-up services. And there's a very important reason for that, Joe. We are in a very industrial community, and the businesses around us are very concerned about aggressive panhandlers in their parking lots or tent cities popping up or trash being left on the streets. So we do good neighbor patrols every day, making sure those things aren't happening. And by not allowing people to have walk-up services, it minimizes the number of homeless traffic in our community.
Some of the other impacts.
So our neighboring businesses aren't impacted by our operations. And that's fundamentally important to us as a homeless service organization. We want to be good neighbors. So not allowing walk-up services is helping to protect the businesses around us.
That's great. And what's been the response from those other businesses too? As I know, there was a lot of opposition before we showed up.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, Joe. Prior to our opening, most of the businesses in our community were strongly opposed to our presence. Most of those businesses are now writing us support checks, sending volunteers, doing donation drives for us. Because what we've proven over the course of 4 years is that the community is safer because of our presence, not the opposite.
That's great. That's fantastic. It's so good to hear that local reaction, the neighborly reaction, because like I said, there was a lot of opposition initially from some of the businesses and also some of the residents, not necessarily in the area, but in the kind of surrounding areas. You mentioned being referred to the BLNC. How would somebody be referred? What organizations or agencies would refer somebody, and for what reason?
There are two primary organizations that we get all of our referrals from. The first is Flood Ministries. Flood Ministries is the outreach organization in the Kern County. They have teams of outreach workers out in the streets, in the parks, in the riverbeds every single day, engaging homeless people, offering services. When those people accept the offer of shelter, then Flood Ministries calls us for bed availability. And when we have bed availability, they transport the person to us.
Okay. And once somebody's transferred to BLNC and they come in and there's a bed available, there's a space available, what happens? What's their journey look like in general? I know everybody's is going to look a little different, but just kind of, or what maybe go into what services might be available to somebody who's coming there.
Well, you're right. It's a unique journey for each person. There's no blueprint for how the process is going to go. It's unique to the individual. But what happens right away is they get connected with their housing navigator. And we do a psychosocial assessment, which basically gives us the full background picture of this person, what led to their being with us, and what measures we're going to need to take to help end their homelessness. So that's kind of the first step. Meet with your navigator. We get a good sense of what brought you here, and we start to develop a plan for your housing. After that, there are a lot of action steps the guest has to take. They're going to need to go to DMV to get that license. We'll give them the voucher. They won't have to pay for it. But there are action steps they have to take. They're going to have to go get their Social Security card. They may have legal proceedings that have to be resolved before they can move forward with the housing. So initially it's about identifying those barriers and getting the guests to start taking action steps to resolve those barriers. After that, it's kind of just a process of acquainting yourself to the shelter system. You know, there's a lot of patience involved with our guests. It's not easy to get them connected with a voucher. And once they're connected with a voucher, it's not easy to find a landlord who will rent to them. Getting the voucher is just the first step. You still have to find a landlord who will accept that. Those things tend to take a significant amount of time. So for a great deal of time in the shelter, the guests are really just patiently waiting for that next good thing to happen. We provide a lot of activities throughout the day in the shelter to kind of keep them occupied, keep them productive. That's kind of general how the process goes.
Okay. And talking about the referrals, I do want to make it clear too, this is not we can't compel somebody to go to the shelter even where we have a bed. We can't make them do it. It has to be voluntary. We can say, hey, we have this available, but we can't force them to do it. I think there's maybe a misconception sometimes for kids that think, well, just make them go. Like, get them off the street so we don't, they're not there, and get them the help they need. But it has to be a voluntary acceptance of that offer.
Yeah, that's correct. They have to want to go.
And that's an important part of it, right?
Yeah, well, sure. And, one of the other referring agencies into our shelter is Bakersfield Police Department. BPD drops off people to us most days. 1 or 2 people usually dropped off. What happens sometimes is those people, once the police officer leaves, they leave too. because they didn't really want to come into shelter. They just didn't want to go to jail.
Gotcha.
So they'll take the ride, they'll come to the shelter. They may stay an hour, they may stay a day, but oftentimes they leave because they're not ready for shelter.
Okay.
It's a challenge for somebody to navigate the shelter system.
Yeah.
It's not easy for them.
You mentioned too also about having activities and having things available to them to be productive. I know one of the services, one of the programs that you guys offer there is the culinary program.
Yeah.
And I've been to a couple of the graduations there, and it's been really cool.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that program. What does it do? What does it mean to the guests who have gone through it, and what successes have you seen?
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this. We're really proud of our culinary training program. One of the things we're very cognizant of is the fact that many of our guests may want to return to work, but they don't have any marketable job skills. So we have a commercial kitchen. We make hot breakfast, lunch, and dinner 3 times a day. We have an amazing culinary staff there. So we just took the existing resources we already had, and we created this job training program in the culinary arts where guests can come and work alongside our culinary staff as they're preparing them. And they learned all these fundamental skills. And at the back end of that, it's a 10-week training program. There's a big graduation ceremony. They get a personalized chef coat with their name on it. They get a certificate of training, and then we do job placement for them.
Until you're very proud of this.
I am. Look, praise your bias. Yeah. Yeah. Well, because it's changing people's lives, Joe. And what I'm most proud of this is we didn't have to go ask for money to do this. We just looked at the resources we already have and maximized the benefit of those. And that makes me very proud because there are a lot of agencies doing a lot of good work, but they're all competing for fewer and fewer pools of money to do their work. So whenever you can create a program and not have to ask for money to do it, that's a big win for everybody.
And if I remember right, they have an opportunity to then go work at a commercial kitchen in the local area. I don't know if you have a partnership with some of these restaurants, but some of your graduates have gone on to full-time employment.
Yes, they have. Several restaurants have hired us. Casey's Steakhouse is a big supporter, always willing to hire our graduates. We've even hired 3 of our graduates to work in our own kitchen.
That's awesome.
That's a great full circle story because they started as a guest and now they're employed and they're housed.
And they're an example then to anybody that's there that, look, this person was where you were. They've lifted themselves up. They were able to go through this program and are being productive. And then they're helping the new people, the people that are here now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's really cool. One of the things I wanted to ask you about is, what do you think? First off, I think you feel this facility has been successful, correct? It's been open for just about 4 years.
Prior to our opening 4 years ago, I would not have imagined we could be as successful as we have been. Yes, we have been wildly successful in terms of getting people permanently housed.
What do you think is behind that success? Is that something from Mercy House? Is it from the city? Is it a philosophy? Is it just the facility itself or the resources available? What do you attribute to that success?
Yeah, thank you for asking me that. And first of all, let me state this. When I talk about the success of our housing placements, this week we celebrate our 4-year anniversary. And also this week, we've reached 400 permanent housing placements.
That's amazing.
So we're averaging 100 permanent housing placements a year with a very difficult, very vulnerable population. It's extraordinary success. And when you ask me what I attribute that success to, I would tell you this. We have essentially the same resources as other service providers. We don't have any magic coupons that somebody else doesn't have. I think the reason we have been so successful at getting so many people housed is we have an extraordinary emphasis on human dignity. Everyone on my staff, from the janitors to the executive directors, are trained to understand that just in order for people to get to our doors, they've been deeply traumatized. So to manage all that trauma, our most potent weapon is human dignity. From the day they walk into the door, our emphasis is on empowering them, valuing them, finding ways to show them that they matter and that they are worth saving. And we do that over and over and over every day. Every encounter with every guest every day is a chance to empower them and give them dignity. And when you start from a place of prioritizing human dignity, I think people start to see that. They feel that dignity. They start to value themselves perhaps more than when they came in. And more than anything else, Joe, I think that's it. I think it's just a strong emphasis on human dignity. We believe that every human being is created in the image of God, and they deserve the dignity that goes along with that title. Furthermore, we believe that homelessness is inconsistent with that dignity. So for us, our whole foundation is that fundamental idea that dignity belongs to everyone, and homelessness is inconsistent with that dignity. And when everybody on my staff takes that approach from a heart level, it just makes a difference in people's lives. They start to believe that they are worth saving, and then they start taking the action steps to change their own lives. So that, to me, is our secret sauce.
I totally get it. And I've heard you say that before in some of your other comments when we've had public events and things. So I had a feeling that was probably where you were going to go. And I think that's great. And I think probably a lot of those people that have come in and have been guests and have gone through the services, it's by the time they get to your door, it's probably been a while since they've felt dignity or had that as a concept. And I can imagine that, or maybe I can't imagine how big a difference that would be for you mentally to be able to go through that then.
Sure. I've talked to thousands of homeless people, and what I hear over and over and over is that the most painful part of their homelessness is not hunger or cold or loneliness or illness. The most painful part of their homelessness is that the whole world is pretending like they don't even exist. And the whole world is trying their best to not even see them. So for us on day one, our message is, we see you. You matter here. And that makes a big difference.
That's great. So Theo, one last thing before we go here, I want to get into, we've mentioned it a couple times, the anniversary is this week. It's October 26th. And it's been 4 years since the BLNC has been open. I believe you were there since day one.
All right. I was there before day one.
Yeah, exactly, before day one. Yeah. And I imagine you have some staff at your facility that have been there since day one as well.
I do.
Is there anybody you'd like to recognize, or even just generally, kind of acknowledge that commitment?
Calling out any single staff who felt they did in the front.
Yeah.
So I will just give a general shout out to all of my staff.
You know how many it's been that you've had for 4 years?
Total number of staff who've just under 100.
Just under 100. Okay.
Yeah. I lost my.
I'm sorry. Yeah, just recognizing the commitment that your staff has had.
Oh yes, I just a comment about all the staff in general. They are extraordinary people. They do really difficult work on a very large scale under confusing circumstances with highly vulnerable people, and yet they walk into that troubled space every day and they make small miracles happen. I couldn't be more proud of the people I work with. They truly are saints.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Theo. I appreciate your time. And I know all the hard work you guys are doing over there is obviously paying off, because we're seeing 100 people being placed into housing every year, and just hitting that 400 mark this week for 2024. So just want to wrap up here and thank you again for taking your time and coming over here and talking to us about the BLNC and everything you guys are doing. I'm sure we'll have you back at some point.
I look forward to it. Can I make one close?
Absolutely.
And I'd like this to be understood by the citizens of Bakersfield, that we have housed 400 people and we have 300 people in the shelter today. That's 700 homeless people who are off the streets of Bakersfield because of the work of the Brundage Lane Navigation Center.
That's awesome.
That's a win for the whole city.
You guys are doing amazing work over there. And I've been there a few times, and I know we've seen improvements made over there and everything. And it's always incredible to see the new additions or the new services or the new amenities that are being added, including expanding the pet shelter so we could accept more people as well. And I know we have an agreement with one of the hospitals to provide some care there as well. So again, amazing facility. We want to thank you again for your time today. And I think that will wrap us up here for the Something Better podcast. I've been Joe Conroy. We've been talking with Theo Dues here from the Brundage Lane Navigation Center. And so we thank you and hope we'll catch you in the next one.